Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Flint. My name is Kathy Frazee. If you are new to us, I hope the following will help you learn more about the Unitarian Universalist faith. If you respect other people, even when they are different from you, this might be the faith for you. If you have your own beliefs and truths, but respect what others believe, this faith might be for you. If you care for the interdependent web of life of which we are all a part, this faith might be for you. If you strive for peace, justice, and liberty for all in this world, this faith might be for you. If you value the democratic process and the right of conscience within our society, this faith might be for you. We hope that you will choose to explore the Unitarian Universalist faith with us. Our congregation welcomes you, whatever truth you hold, whatever gender you identify with, and whomever you love. If you would like more information about UUism or our congregation, please feel free to contact one of our ministers or our office. That contact information can be found at uuflint.org, our website. And now some announcements. Please join us for coffee hour after the service on Zoom. It usually takes place at approximately 11:30. The ID can be found on the website and the e-update. If you are feeling a bit anxious awaiting election results on Tuesday night, join a drop-in anytime Zoom election watch party. Our Zoom code is 817-7537-0975. Again, that Zoom code is 817-7537-0975. And the password is UUCF, I believe. That is from 8 to 10 p.m., drop in anytime, and you can also check for the code on our website. The next announcement is that Reverend Jerry is still conducting a book study group every Wednesday from 6 to 7:30 on an Indigenous people's history. You can contact Jerry for information or go to our website or the e-update. Please consider sharing our Sunday morning service. There's a share button where you watch our service on YouTube, and on Facebook, the more likes we get, the easier it will be for people to find us. We remain grateful for your ongoing gifts of time, talent, and treasure. These all help our congregation maintain our liberal faith community for 90 years. Your continuing pledge payments and gifts through our website or mailed to the church will help ensure your vital presence for years to come. We will begin our service with a prelude from Jennifer Howard. I now invite Reverend Jerry Kerr to light our chalice for this morning. Our reading for the chalice lighting is called A Reminder of the Inner Light by Gregory David Miller. This fire is a reminder of the light within us all, the yearning for freedom, the longing for truth, the flame of intuition, the torch of conscience. We dedicate this service to the remembrance of this holy light. Now, could you please join me at home and here in this sanctuary to recite our covenant? Recognizing the richness of diversity, the beauty and wonder of shared worship, and the transforming power of love and service, we gather as a sacred, intentional community to freely seek knowledge and truth, to celebrate the fullness of life, and by our actions to increase goodness and justice.
Good morning. Our opening words are from Luke Stevens Royer. I walk in as on pilgrimage. The altar cloths are red, white, and blue. The ushers are the women who have been running these things, who have been running everything since before I was born. I'm handed the ballot like a scroll because the questions seem that important, ancient and modern, of what my God and country ask of me. Who? Who for commissioner, mayor, president? Who for District 8, Ward 7, school board? Who will do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly? I make my mark with at least a shred of hope that something good will come from this. And regardless, I remember, the world won't be destroyed entirely by this. The world won't be saved entirely by this. Marking my vote is like kneeling in prayer, because neither will accomplish anything right away, but the purpose of both is to remind me of my deepest hope for the world that I'm trying to create. So I rise from prayer and turn in my ballot and remember the who is me and us and we the people. And again, I set to the task that is mine: justice, mercy, humble service in my small corner of the world.
The words of Thomas Jefferson from his 1801 inaugural address. All too will bear in mind this sacred principle, that though the will of the majority is in all cases to prevail, that will, to be rightful, must be reasonable, that the minority possess their equal rights, which equal law must protect, and to violate would be oppression. Let us then, fellow citizens, unite with one heart and one mind. Let us restore to social intercourse that harmony and affection without which liberty and even life itself are but dreary things. We gathered today to honor people who created and who continue to create our nation through their words and their spirits. When your country is a mess, as is ours, you need to honor the words and deeds of people like Geronimo, the Apache, Frederick Douglass, and Abigail Adams, along with those of Washington and Jefferson. Those men we call our founding fathers were the progressives of their day, and they meant well. But the foundation they built for this country was never that strong. In fact, it is now cracking under the forces of racism, economic inequality, and the greed that fuels global warming. No foundation lasts forever, especially if it was imperfect when it was new. Original imperfections, such as the idea of the Electoral College, to name just one, need to be examined and fixed. The heartfelt and compassionate words of Thomas Jefferson remind us that many of our founders wanted their new country to be a special place for everyone, not just for the powerful and the wealthy. As many of you know, however, Jefferson never freed his own slaves in an era when others were doing just that. Washington, Adams, Jefferson, and the others, they had many progressive ideas that we can be proud of. They wrote that all people are created equal, not a common idea in 1776. But many of our present-day leaders evidently haven't noticed those words in the Declaration of Independence. Our founders said everyone should get equal treatment under the law. But we still live in a country where you can get fair treatment if you have enough money for a good lawyer, while others get the opposite, shot down or strangled because they're not white. We have so very much work to do to become the country we want to be. Today, we will cautiously honor our liberal-minded but often flawed founders. And we can do this because we know how to honor people for their strengths without being foolish enough to ignore their many imperfections. For most of us, the very idea that we might worship our founding fathers, as some people do, it makes no sense to anyone who believes in a thing called progress. We know that the men of old, their Constitution, and their Bible do not hold the final wisdom. Pretending that they do keeps us from becoming the shining city on a hill that they themselves envisioned. Today we acknowledge others who are not thought of as founders. Just because a person didn't sign the Declaration of Independence doesn't disqualify them from being a founder. The voices that were often ignored in the past must now be heard. Building a country doesn't stop after you've written a constitution and decided how many representatives each state will get. That was the easy part. Many of those who speak to us today through our readings died a long time ago. That makes no difference. Their words continue to create a nation that someday can be as great as the one envisioned by our original founders. Our country may have been born in 1776, but like a human being, a country must be spiritually reborn many times to achieve its highest goals. Whatever happens in Tuesday's election, we will continue to birth a country that is truly one that treats everyone equally.
These words were written by Tess Baumberger for the eve of the 2016 election and are appropriate for this upcoming election as well. Please join with me in a spirit of meditation and contemplation. Spirit of wisdom, as we prepare to elect new citizens to lead us in our communities, towns and cities, in our counties and in our states, and in our heart-torn nation. Grant us wisdom and discernment so that we may choose those of peaceful heart, of competent mind, and of servant spirit. Spirit of the harvest, help us to winnow the grain from the chaff and to reap the legacy of freedom our founders planted for all of us. Help us gather together as one people united in concern for this country founded upon such promising ideals. Spirit of healing, grant that we may bridge the breaches that have opened between us. Help us to understand one another, to listen to the stories of who we are, and to find common ground on which we can move forward together. Amen, and blessed be.
In 1797, President John Adams spoke about the great importance of fair elections, voicing concerns that sound very familiar to us 223 years later. He said, "We should be unfaithful to ourselves if we should ever lose sight of the danger to our liberties if anything partial or extraneous should infect the purity of free, fair, virtuous, and independent elections. If an election is to be determined by a majority of a single vote, and that vote can be procured by a party through artifice or corruption, the government may be the choice of a party for its own ends, not of a nation for the national good. if that solitary suffrage can be obtained by foreign nations, by flattery or menaces, by fraud or violence, by terror, intrigue, or venality, the government may not be the choice of the American people, but of foreign nations. It may be foreign nations who govern us, and not we, the people, who govern ourselves. And candid men will acknowledge that in such cases, choice would have little advantage to boast of over lot or chance.
Abigail and John Adams and Mercy and James Warren were friends. They were all active in Massachusetts politics. They met in 1773. Abigail and Mercy became close and corresponded regularly before, during, and after the Revolutionary War. Mercy Otis Warren was also a protagonist, playwright, and historian. She also corresponded with poets, authors, and politicians, including John Adams, never resisting an opportunity to give her opinion on an issue of the day. Mercy once wrote,
I disregard the opinion that women make but indifferent politicians when the observations are just and honorary to the heart and character. I think it very immaterial whether they flow from a female lip in the soft whispers of private friendship, or whether thundered in the Senate in the bolden language of the other sex.
Much of what we know about Mercy is through the letters she wrote to historical figures whose papers have been preserved. For instance, in 1774, Mercy Warren wrote a letter to John Adams about not choosing an ambitious man as their leader at Continental Congress.
Such a one might subvert the principles on which your institution is founded, abolish your order, and build up a monarchy on the ruins of this happy institution.
To Abigail Adams, she later wrote,
the future freedom and happiness of a wide extended empire rested in the hands of the men in Philadelphia. America stands armed with resolution and virtue, but she recoils at the idea of drawing the sword against the nation from whence she derived her origin. Yet Britain, like an unnatural parent, is ready to plunge her dagger into the bosom of her affectionate child.
Mercy continued to publish pamphlets demanding war if necessary, but hoped for peace in her private correspondence. She asked her husband if her words were too harsh for a lady, and he responded,
you are possessed of eminent virtue and distinguished piety. For all these I esteem, I love you in a degree that I cannot express. They are all now to be called into action for the good of mankind, for the good of your friends, for the promotion of patriotism.
When war did break out and the men she knew were in danger, she told Abigail Adams,
though I feel a painful concern for their safety, I acknowledge I feel some kind of pride in being so closely connected with persons who dare to act so noble a part.
However, when Abigail Adams wrote to her husband, urging him to remember the ladies when he and other members of the Continental Congress fought for America's independence and received a less than favorable reply, Mercy was silent, even after a frustrated Abigail wrote to her to tell her what happened. Perhaps it was the 16-year age difference, or Mercy not wanting to ally the many men who admire her, or even her primary preoccupation with liberty for all. but Mercy, the most prominent female writer of the time, took little interest in women's rights. Here's a letter Abigail Adams wrote to Mercy telling her what happened in 1776.
He is very saucy to me in return for the list of female grievances which I transmitted to him. I think I would get you to join me in a petition to Congress. I thought it was very probable our wise statesmen would erect a new government and form a new code of laws. I ventured to speak a word on behalf of our sex, who are rather hardly dealt with by the laws of England, which give such unlimited power to the husband to use the wife ill. I requested that our legislators would consider our case, and as all men of delicacy and sentiment are averse to exercising the power they possess, yet as there is a natural propensity in human nature to domination, I thought the most generous plan was to put it out of the power of the arbitrary and tyrannic, to inquire us with impunity and not injure, by establishing some laws in our favor upon just and liberal principles. I believe I even threatened fomenting a rebellion in case we were not considered, and assured him he would not hold ourselves bold by any laws in which we had neither a voice nor representation. In return, he tells me he cannot but laugh.
The lack of a response from Mercy caused a temporary rift in the friendship, but eventually their correspondence continues. As almost a postscript to that lady's letter, Abigail writes to Mercy in August of 1777.
When I bring home to my own dwelling these tragical scenes which are every week presented in the public papers to us, and only an idea realize them, my whole soul is distressed. Were I a man, I must be in the field. I could not live to endure the thought of my habitation desolated, my children butchered, and I an inactive spectator.
Will you be my refuge, my haven in the storm? Will you keep the embers warm when my fire's all but gone? Will you remember and bring me sprigs of rosemary? Be my sanctuary till I can carry on, carry on, carry on. This one knocked me to the ground. This one knocked me to my knees. I should have seen it coming, but it surprised me. Will you be my refuge, my haven in the storm? Will you keep the embers warm when my fire's all but gone? Will you remember and bring me sprigs of rosemary? Be my sanctuary till I can carry on, carry on, carry on. in a state of true believers on streets called us and them. It's gonna take some time till the world feels safe again. Will you be my refuge, my haven in the storm? Will you keep the embers warm when my fire's all but gone? Will you remember? Bring me sprigs of rosemary, be my sanctuary till I can carry on, carry on, carry on. You can rest here in the chapel or in a circle of friends, a quiet grove of trees or between two bookends. Will you be my refuge, my haven in the storm? Will you keep the embers warm when my fire's all but gone? Will you remember to bring me sprigs of rosemary, be my sanctuary till I can carry on, carry on, carry on, carry on.
Lucreta Mott would have been 227 years old this year, but she wouldn't have celebrated with sweets. She was against using sugar. Keep listening to hear why. Mott was best known as one of the pioneers of women's rights, one of the leaders at Seneca Falls, but she was an educator and abolitionist first. As a child, in the last few years of the 18th century in Nantucket, Massachusetts, she was labeled by her schoolmates as a Spitfire. Lucreta lived up to that nickname the rest of her life. Lucreta Coffin was a Quaker, trained as a teacher, and married a fellow educator, James Mott. They often took in refuge slaves, yet Lucreta felt helping a few individuals was not enough. She realized nearly all commerce was implicated in what Lucreta regarded as the sinful sale and ownership of human flesh. She wrote, "Going one day to our meeting, most unexpectedly to myself, the duty was impressed upon my mind to abstain from the products of slave labor. I strove to live in obedience to manifest duty." Although most of her circle were abolitionists, Lucreta's insistence that more must personally be done alienated friends and relatives. Breaking with those who did not agree was like parting with my right hand or right eye, she remembered, But when I left the meeting, I yielded to the obligation, and then for nearly 40 years, whatever I did was under the conviction that it was wrong to partake of the products of slave labor. Doing whatever she could not to partake in the products of slavery included altering birthday celebrations. Since sugar at this time was often produced using slave labor, for her children's birthday parties, she made candies with sweetener she knew to be untainted from forced labor and passed them out in bags containing verses. Take this, my friend, you need not fear to eat. No slave hath toiled to cultivate this sweet. Not making sweet cakes was not the only way Lucreta fought for abolition. She toured and spoke extensively, but often clashed with abolitionists who believed women should not be prominent roles in the movement. When she was excluded from attending the World Anti-Slavery Convention in 1840 because she was a woman, it only expanded Lucreta's activism. She was soon a suffragist leader as well. She advocated that it was time that women should move into the sphere Providence assigned her and no longer rest satisfied in the limits which corrupt custom and a perverted application of the scriptures had placed on her. Although she was a Quaker, she liked to refer to her positions as a heretic. She said the early Friends were agitators, disturbers of the peace, but it was her duty for those following in their footsteps, she insisted, to stand out in our heresy. Lucreta kept going until her death. When President Ulysses Grant ordered the removal of Indians from a California reservation, Lucreta, at age 80, put on her bonnet to go see him since he was staying nearby. Lucreta Mott would let nothing pass if she had something to say.
This reading is from the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave, written by himself. Dark and terrible as is this picture, I hold it to be strictly true of the overwhelming mass of professed Christians in America. They strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. Could anything be more true of our churches? They would be shocked at the proposition of fellowshipping a sheep stealer, and at the same time, they hug to their communion a man stealer and brand me with being an infidel if I find fault with them for it. They attend with Pharisee strictness to the outward forms of religion and at the same time neglect the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. They are always ready to sacrifice, but seldom to show mercy. They are they who, representatives professing to love God, whom they have not seen, whilst they hate their brother, whom they have seen. They love the heathen on the other side of the globe. They can pray for him, pay money to have the Bible put in his hand, and missionaries to instruct him, while they despise and totally neglect the heathen at their own doors. Such is, very briefly, my view of the religion of this land, and to avoid any misunderstanding growing out of the use of general terms, I mean by the religion of this land that which is revealed in the words, deeds, and actions of those bodies, north and south, calling themselves Christian churches, and yet in union with slaveholders. It is against religion, as presented by these bodies, that I have felt it my duty to testify. I conclude these remarks by copying the following portrait of a religion of the South, which is by communion and fellowship the religion of the North, which I soberly affirm is true to the life and without caricature or the slightest exaggeration. It is said to have been drawn several years before the present anti-slavery agitation began by a Northern Methodist preacher who, while residing in the South, had an opportunity to see slaveholding morals, manners, and piety. With his own eyes, he said, "Shall I not visit for these things, saith the Lord? Shall not my soul be avenged on such a nation as this?"
Here are the words of those of the Native American we know as Geronimo of the Apache. They are the words of a founder who builds our sense of shame that may someday make us a better nation. We are vanishing from the earth, yet I cannot think we are useless or useless. God would not have created us. For each tribe of men Usen created, he also made a home. When Usen created the Apaches, he also created their homes in the West. He gave them such grain, fruits, and game as they needed to eat. To restore their health when disease attacked them, he taught them where to find these herbs and how to prepare them for medicine. He gave them a pleasant climate, and all they needed for clothing and shelter was at hand. Thus it was in the beginning. The Apaches and their homes, each created for the other by Usen himself. When we are taken from these homes, we sicken and die. How long will it be until it is said, there are no Apaches remaining?
God shed his grace on thee, and till selfish gain no longer stain the banner of the free. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, till selfish gain no longer stain the banner of the free, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
There is too much hardship in this world to not find joy every day. There is too much injustice in this world to not find the balance every day. There is too much pain in this world to not heal every day. Each of us is ministers to a weary world. Let us go forth now and do that which calls us to make this world more loving, more compassionate, and more filled with the grace of divine presence every day.
And let us extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.